Hello, everybody. First of all, the older I get, and 2 days ago was my birthday, so I'm 29 again. The older I get, the more I realize that although school and my teachers and college and my professors and my coaches and my parents and my dear family and my friends, the more I realize how much they taught me about life, I now realize that it's life itself that has taught me the greatest lessons I've ever learned, because I'm not sure about for you, but for me, life seems to write my best material. Two major events have happened during my lifetime, one as a child, one as an adult, that have profoundly changed who I am as a person, as a husband, as a father, as a businessman, as a speaker. I want to share those stories with you because I have a feeling that you can relate and that you might take pieces of them with you as well as I did. Let me share the first one. The first one happened when I was just a child, and I was on vacation with my parents. It was up in Port Clinton, Ohio. The only reason that you might know Port Clinton is it's by Cedar Point Amusement Park, and if you've ever been there, it's a fabulous place. And we went fishing, and the gentleman on the right in the white coat and the black hat, the white fishing coat and the black hat, was my father. I lost my father many years ago. He was my best friend. He was my hero. He's still my best friend. He's still my hero. The cute little bugger in the green army helmet and the life vest, although I am clearly on land, was me at the age of 5. My father used to recount this story all the time. He would tell it all the time, and thus I remember it now. And according to my father, I ran up to him and I said, "Dad, Dad, Dad, look at all those fish. Please take me fishing. Oh my gosh, you've never taken me fishing. Look at all those fish. I want to go." He's like, "Davy, it's dinner time. Your mother will kill us. We can't go right now, but okay, tomorrow morning I will take you fishing for the first time." So according to my father, he got very, very little sleep that night because every hour on the hour, I tried to wake him up to see if it was time to go. I believe he said it started about 2 in the morning. I went in, I grabbed a hold of his pajama bottoms, and I'm like, "Dad." He's like, "No." 3 o'clock in the morning, "No." 4 o'clock in the morning, "David Douglas, 5 o'clock in the morning, I will hurt you." Okay? 6 o'clock in the morning, he finally went, "Okay." And we got up and we got in the car and we put all of our fishing gear in the car and we put our lunches in the car and we drove around. And my father found this perfect spot for us to fish. It was an old one-lane bridge with just enough room, extra room on the sides of that lane on each side for us to fish off of the bridge. The only bad thing was there was no parking anywhere nearby, and there were actually no parking signs everywhere. So we had to park almost 3/4 of a mile away, but it was a beautiful day, and we didn't care, and I was with my hero. So we parked the car, we walked all the way back to the bridge, and we started to fish, and it was a gorgeous day. It was a Carolina blue sky, and the sun was out, and there was just enough wind to keep us cool, and we started fishing. And off in the distance, we heard a loud growling noise, and I thought it was thunder. I think he did too, but it was a perfect day, so it couldn't be thunder. And that noise got louder and closer until around the corner came 25 or 30 Hells Angels bikers. And this is during the time when the Hells Angels weren't the peace-loving, philanthropic group of people they have become today. All right, so as they crossed by us on the bridge, they were firing up their bikes, and they were cussing at us, and a couple of them were doing donuts, and a couple of them were doing wheelies, and a couple pretended like they were going to push us off the bridge. And my father pulled me in close, and that made me feel safe. And finally, they all crossed the bridge. They went up to a stop sign, they turned left, and they faded away. Now, I see a lot of parents here today, and I'm sure a lot of parents will see this, and I think my father had something called parental radar. He knew the situation wasn't over. So we put our poles down next to the bridge, and he took me by the hand. He said, "Davy, come with me." That was his nickname for me, Davy. And he said, "Davy, come with me." And he walked me to the end of the bridge. He walked me down through the weeds, and he put me underneath the bridge on those large, oversized rocks that keep the bridge from eroding. And I don't know about you if you have childhood memories that come back to you like that are just vivid, but he sat me on those rocks and he said the following words. He said, "Davy, just sit here. Don't make a sound. Don't come back up. Don't move. I'll come back down and get you. I love you." And according to my father, I looked at him and said, "Dad, but I don't have a pole. How am I supposed to fish without a pole?" He's like, "Shut up and sit there." So he went back up on the bridge and he started to fish. And not 5 minutes later, They came back and they beat my father senseless. Now, people ask me all the time, they're like, David, why didn't your father just take you and go? Because we had to park almost a mile away, and I believe that my father thought that if they caught him, they would catch me. He was protecting his child. He was taking one for the team. Now, I'm under the bridge hearing them beat my father senseless. I can hear them laughing. I can hear them spitting. And the last thing I remember is they each took turns kicking him. I remember that sound like it was yesterday. And then they got on their bikes, they fired them up, they started laughing more, and they drove away, and they were gone. Now, I'm underneath there crying where you can't breathe in, you can't breathe out. I thought about going up top, but I was worried that one of them maybe stayed behind to get me. At that moment, I heard a noise. I looked to the right. It was my father. He didn't look at me, but he walked down to the water's edge. He took off that white coat. He doused it with water, and he used it to clean all the blood off of himself. He put it over his left forearm. He walked over. He took me by the hand, and he said, Davy, come on, we need to go back to the car. And I remember thinking, I'm so glad. I never want to fish again. I never want to go outside again, and I want to be homeschooled. And so we walked all the way back. We walked all the way back to the car, and he opened up the trunk, and he threw that bloodied coat into a trash bag that was in the trunk. And he pulled out a lime green windbreaker. He put it on. He zipped it back up. He shut the trunk, and he took me by the hand. He said, come on, Davy, we need to go back to the bridge and fish. I didn't want to go back to the bridge and fish. I was scared to death. But I did not want to what my father. I didn't want to disappoint him. So we went all the way back to that bridge and we fished. We had a ball. We caught fish all day long. We ate lunch. He taught me what a keeper fish was. He taught me what one was that you throw back. He showed me how to fillet a fish. He showed me that you throw the remains back in the water, that the scavengers can eat as well, that you don't waste any part of it. See, my father knew that if he didn't take me back to fish on the bridge that day, that I might have been scared to go outside on sunny days. I might have been afraid of motorcycles, of people with long hair or beards, or the color brown or black. My father knew that if he did not take me back on the bridge that day, I would have never learned to choose courage over fear. Choosing courage over fear is the reason I'm standing in front of you today. It's the reason I've entertained millions of people and our troops all over the world. Why? Because my father took me back on that bridge that day. The second major event that happened in my life happened a couple of years ago, and I was flying from Atlanta to Salt Lake City and then Salt Lake City to San Francisco for a major appearance. And this is the day that I met Santa. And I'm not talking about a store Santa with the costume and sitting in the mall and the kids driving him crazy and going, get this kid away from me. I'm talking about the fact that I met Santa. Okay, I boarded the plane and I walked through the galley on the flight, which is where the flight attendants hang out. I walked through first class, which is the nice, comfortable, larger, more expensive seats that were not appropriate for me that day. And I crossed past what is called the bulkhead wall. The bulkhead wall separates first class from scum of the earth, which is called coach seating. Okay? So, and on this particular, how many of you have ever flown? All right. On this particular day, I was on a plane that had 3 seats, an aisle, and 3 seats. Sitting in the first seat on the aisle of the bulkhead row was Santa. And ladies and gentlemen, when I tell you I was looking at Santa, I was looking at Santa. The man weighed 350 to 400 pounds. He had curly white hair. He had this thick beard. His eyelashes were ridiculous. Everything was white. He had already covered himself over in one of the blankets from the overhead bin. He had one of those square, disgusting pillows from the overhead bin. He was actually quite calmly sitting there, and his eyes were closed, and he looked awfully comfortable. And you've known me for this long. I wanted to say something. I wanted to pull on his beard. I wanted to do something, but I let him go. And so I ended up sitting right behind him. So I got myself comfortable, and the plane finally filled up. Now, the plane's getting hotter and hotter because they hadn't turned the engines on, and the last 3 people to get on the flight are a mother about 35 years old and her twins, a little boy and a little girl 4 years old. She's in the bulkhead row across from Santa. So as a smart mother, she pins the little boy against the window. She puts herself in the middle, and she puts the little girl across from Santa. Now the plane is getting hot, and the children are trying to open up the air vent, but no air is really coming out. So they start kicking the bulkhead wall, and they start trying to fan themselves, and the mother is trying to do everything she can, as you mothers do. And at that moment, Santa finally stirred a little bit in front of me. And I thought, okay, this is nice. And he looks over, this happened right in front of me, It changed my life. He looks over at the little girl and he said, honey, are you hot? And she said, yes, I am. He said, would you like a fan? She goes, I'd love a fan. The man reaches over and pulls out a sack. The man had a sack, okay? He reaches in and he pulls out a little piece of black plastic that looks about almost like this, ironically. And I remember thinking, Santa, that is not a fan, you're high, and you're disappointing a child, okay? So he takes it and he opens it up and he snaps it together, and it's a pleated Japanese plume fan. The little girl starts fanning him, fanning me, fanning the bulkhead wall, fanning the people behind, fanning the fan. The little boy on the window erupts. He erupts. I'm hot. I want a fan. I'm hot. You do. You want a fan too, don't you? And Santa looks at him and he says, well, I've got one for you too. The man had a sack, okay? He reaches in and he pulls out one of those little fans that takes like 1D battery. It has the 3 little flexible blades, not the ones at the beach now that have water, but just one of the little ones with air. He hands it to the mother, and the mother hands it. Now the little boy's happy, the little girl's happy. The mother looks over at Santa. She doesn't say a word, but she looks at him and she goes, which I believe is God bless your soul in mother to Santa. Finally, I could interact with the man. I tapped him on the outside shoulder, and he turned back toward me, and I go, Santa. He said, ho, 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 son, ho, ho, ho. He was a good sport. So we took off from Atlanta, and for those of you that fly Atlanta, Salt Lake City is a long flight. We all fell asleep. When we landed in Salt Lake City, it woke all of us up, all right? We all woke up, and as you realize, when planes land, people will turn psychotic. They will trample each other and kill each other to get off that plane. And I thought, if I don't help this man get off this plane, it's going to be hard for him to get off. And so I'm slowly taking down my stuff, and I've got my bag, and I've got one forearm behind his chair. I've got one forearm behind the little girl's chair, and I'm actually holding people up. I'm being pushed forward now to where I'm talking to Santa backward. And I'm like, Santa, go ahead and get off the flight. He's, no, son, go ahead. I'm like, no, you help that family. Let me help you out. He goes, son, I can't. And he pulled off his blanket, and he was a double amputee about right here, down each leg. I stepped in front of him, and I let the angry people at me go by, and I looked at him, and I said, sir, I am incredibly sorry for embarrassing you. I feel terrible. And he said, it's okay. I said, we've kind of bonded on this flight. Do you mind if I ask you what happened? He said, no. Last year on our 40th wedding anniversary, my wife and I were on our way to the same restaurant that we've gone for 26 years in a row. We were hit head-on by a drunk driver. She was killed instantly. I was pinned in the car in such a way that they had to amputate both my legs to keep me alive. And I said, sir, where are you on your way to now? And he said, I'm on my way to the West Coast to see my grandson. I've never met him. He was born a year before this. I've never seen my own grandson. And I looked at him and I said, sir, I just don't think I could be where you are. I don't think I could lose my wife in a tragic way, have my marriage end in such a tragic way, lose the ability to lose my use of my legs, and here I am traveling alone, helping another family. And then he said something to me that changed my life, and I hope it changes yours. He said, son, did I help those children? Yes. Did they have a better trip? Yes. Were they laughing? Yes. Did I ease that mother's burden? Yes. Did I make you laugh? Yes. He said, then I paid honor to my wife, because that's where she lives now. She lives in my heart. And every time I do something for someone else or I make someone laugh, I pay honor to her. At that moment, I stepped back. I was stunned. And I learned a couple of things, folks. Number one, we choose our attitude every single day. We choose our attitude every single day. Number two, I needed to stop whining about things that truly didn't matter. And number three, I had to figure out a way. I got to meet Santa. How do you all get to meet him? How do I share him with you? Well, I'm going to tell you right now. If you'll reach underneath your chair, I've given you a gift. Every one of you has a red wrist bracelet waiting for you underneath your chair. If you'll take a moment and grab it. If you'll all put it on, take a moment and put it on. And if I can have your attention back, please. You're going to notice that it says WWSD. It stands for What Would Santa Do? And here's how I'm going to share Santa with you for the rest of your life. So you're in a relationship right now that's not going very well. Are you going to let it keep heading that direction? Or are you going to look at your wristband and say, what would Santa do? and plan some time to talk to that person about repairing that relationship. You have a horrible week coming up at work. You've got a tremendous workload as a college student. Are you going to let it overwhelm you? Or are you going to look at your wristband and say, what would Santa do? And ascertain the best course of action to get the best results you possibly can. You had to park really far out one day in a parking lot. Oh, it's raining. Are you going to complain every step of the way till you're back inside? Or are you going to look at your wrist bracelet and say, what would Santa do? You know what Santa would do? Santa would take every step with joy and with smile on his face because he'd have fully functioning legs to make that walk for you. My father taught us to choose courage over fear. Santa taught us that we choose our attitude every single day. None of us have an excuse anymore, but to live every single day to the fullest. That's my time with you. Thank you very, very, very much. Appreciate it.